Formula One on 5 Live.
Formula One is back in action for the 2026 season. Brand new cars as a result of the biggest regulation overhaul the sport has ever seen. 22 cars and 11 teams will take to the grid on Sunday afternoon here in Melbourne, Australia for the first race of the year. That's where we'll see the first race day pecking order. Until then, though, there's a bit of investigation to be had. With one practice session done for the day, it was Ferrari who came out on top, but it's still early stages here in the Melbourne heat. It's Harry Benjamin with you up in commentary. Alongside me in the box is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. I mean, first of all, let's just touch on FP1, Mark. Leclerc about 4/10 ahead of Hamilton, but Ferrari with a really great start out of the blocks.
Yeah, a really good start, and you know exactly what they needed after a really difficult season last year. We saw struggles from both drivers, notably Lewis Hamilton, of course. British fans will be desperate to see him have a much better year this year, and it's off to a decent start. He will have some concerns from a Lewis perspective that he's still behind his teammate, but there's a long, long way to go in this weekend and a huge amount of learning to be done as well.
I think one of the other things as well to pick up on, Andrew, was perhaps the surprise that the Mercedes powered teams, including the Works team, weren't up there right at the top, the quickest one being Oscar Piastri's McLaren in 6th.
Yeah, both Mercedes and McLaren had difficult first sessions. Mercedes were struggling with understeer on the chassis, and they hadn't got their energy deployment strategy right at all in that first session. It doesn't necessarily mean it won't be right now. Of course, there'll have been a lot of work going on, hard work going on at Brackley and Brixworth back in the UK overnight to fix that for this first session, and McLaren again also not quite in the right place. That may be related, I'm not sure.
Well, talk about rough sessions. There was a rough session indeed for one team, and that is arguably the biggest story of the weekend, and it's the nightmare down at Aston Martin with a Honda power unit that won't play ball. Fernando Alonso failed to take part in free practice 1, and Lance Stroll only managed a couple of laps before having to come in and be sidelined into the garage. Jenny Gow is outside Aston Martin, down in pit lane for us. Hi Jenny, any signs of movement ahead of this second free practice session?
Plenty of signs of movement, whether that's positive or not I couldn't tell you, but Lance Stroll is at the back of the garage, just suiting up at the moment. The car is in one piece, although no tyres on, but if I go to the other side of the garage to Fernando Alonso's car, that is a different story. It's up on its racks about 2-3 foot in the air. They're just playing around with it. A guy from Honda in a white Honda t-shirt and overalls is trying to they've turned the power on, and that's at least something. Now the problem is they've only got 2 batteries left of the batteries they bought out here, so it's not going to be a full session. They'll send them out, they'll do an install lap, they'll bring them back in, they'll do some readings, and then they'll work out what to do next. But they're having to play it just lap by lap, and it must be excruciatingly painful. I've just spoken to a couple of the team members, and there's no doubt their heads are down. This is not the start they wanted, hoped for, and they've put hours and hours of work into these cars, and it just hasn't paid off at this moment.
No, well, a very good morning to you if you're joining us this morning in the UK. It's an early start, and this might well be the first bit of Formula One that you're tuning into for the year. And Andrew, I think it's worth maybe, I know there's been a lot of action, a lot of chat from Team Principal Adrian Newey since free practice 1. We've had the Team Principal's press conference, but I wonder if you could just backpedal a little bit and kind of explain the context as to how we've got to where we've got with Aston Martin, who were barely present at testing, and the struggles continue into round 1.
Well, I can do that by telling you about what has been the most extraordinary press conference from Adrian Newey. Toto Wolff and Graham Loudon of Mercedes and Cadillac were also there, but they might as well not have been. He had already had one extraordinary press conference yesterday, Adrian Newey. This one was just unbelievable. I'm going to lead on the website on his quote that Fernando Alonso's in a hard mental place to be at the moment, which is not a surprise after the problems he had with Honda back at McLaren 10 years ago. But really, it was the detail that Newey gave us about the plight of Honda. There's no other word for it, really. Vibration problems in the engine causing reliability problems with the battery. They came here with 4 batteries. They've only got 2 left, and they've only done 3 laps. And on one car. How can that... What that's basically saying is that the battery in Fernando Alonso's car broke before he even got out on track. He also... I asked him, how have Honda ended up in this position? He said basically what happened was that they completely disbanded their Formula One power unit team when they decided to quit Formula 1 in 2021, they were still developing their existing engine, which he was using at Red Bull at the time, let's not forget. But the fundamental design and build team was gone. When they reconstituted it, when they decided to come back to Formula 1 in early 2023, they didn't use the old engineers. They were all, to quote what may become an immortal phrase from Adrian Newey, they'd gone off to work on solar panels or something. Didn't ask them to come back, so there's a whole load of new engineers to Formula 1 designing this engine. He described it as a very significant ICE underperformance, effectively. That's the internal combustion engine. And he said from his point of view, he feels helpless. I mean, I could go on and on, but we could be talking all afternoon about Adrian Newey's press conference, but those are the headlines, Harry. And I think this is a new Adrian Newey for me. I've known the man since 1994. I first met him in the Monaco pit lane in 1994. And he's always been generally quite guarded, Mark, hasn't he? But this weekend he's tended to a new person. Actually, I went to him at the end of the press conference and said, Adrian, you should do more of these. You're really good at it. And he laughed, which I'm sure he's not really in a laughing mood at the moment. And we shouldn't laugh, really, because, you know, think of the investment that's gone into this project, Aston Martin. Poor Fernando Alonso. He's been waiting 25 years to work with Adrian Newey in Formula 1. He's finally got him, and he's got another Honda engine problem to deal with. I can't imagine what he's going through. He's been very positive in public, Alonso, but I'm sure in private he's in a dark place. So yeah, that's the Aston Martin situation. And are they going to go out in this session? Dare they go out in this session, given they've got qualifying in the race to come?
It is such a nightmare scenario, and particularly, you know, the context of Fernando Alonso, as you say, and his past dealings with Honda, and the fact that, you know, a lot of people were talking about the Honda power unit, the relationship that came about, and we've had contact down in pit lane. Jenny Gow, were you able to spot that action?
Yes, I'm right here by the Mercedes of George Russell, as you say, contact with his front ring that just has to hold him back, and have a look at that front wing to see what actually happened.
George Russell just said, this guy's just hit my front wing. It was Arvid Lindblad's Racing Bulls. Now, did George Russell have a wheel over the white line?
You have priority in the fast lane, same as quali.
That was Arvid Lindblad and his race engine. Now, the rule is there's a white line that differentiates the fast lane and the slow lane in the pit lane. If you are coming out of your garage and you're able to get a tyre on or over the white line, that gives you priority ahead of the car that's coming down the fast lane. And if you aren't able to do that, then the car in the fast lane has priority.
It was tight.
It was tight.
This one's going to have to go to VAR, I think. It's one of those.
Because actually there was two white lines separated by the Formula 1's official fuel sponsor.
Glad you said that.
Which white line is counted, exactly. So Russell had his wheel over the first one, but then
not the second one.
Not the second one, yeah.
And Arvid Lindblad's race engineer there, Pierre Hamlin, saying that he did have priority. Slow-moving Alpine on the straight, and Lewis Hamilton really had to dart out of the way of Franco Colapinto's incredibly slow Alpine. He's trying to get out of the way. I don't know if that's a problem, or if Colapinto is just coaxing down there, but he was right on the racing line. And, for Colapinto and Hamilton, that was a bit too close for comfort in these early stages of FP2.
That was utterly terrifying. That was Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari going flat out along the start-finish straight and came across Colapinto's car almost stationary, seemingly like at walking pace. And luckily Hamilton was able to react and get out of the way, but that could have been something very nasty. I don't know what happened, whether Colapinto was finishing a lap and slowing down, cooling things down, recharging the batteries, which is going to be a big talking point over the course of this season. But
that was something people were worried about, the sudden slowing down on the straights with these new cars, and that they introduced a sort of, we're all used to seeing the flashing lights and the rain lights on the back of Formula 1 cars. There is a certain sequence that dictates whether a car is going to go slow because they're saving energy. This is the sound of Franco Colapinto, and he's got an issue around the final corner.
So he's already got a problem coming out the final corner. Can't get the power down, almost like he's lost power, but the problem was he stayed on the racing line. Lewis Hamilton, who you can hear now, comes out of the final corner at full speed, and that must have been very scary because the approaching speed was massive.
Car going crazy slow on the pit straight.
And that was Lewis Hamilton's response. You have to say there that Colapinto didn't look like it was more of a problem there than harvesting any kind of energy on purpose, and he should have moved straight to the right-hand side. Yeah. He had ample opportunity to do so. Alpine may well get some kind of reprimand from on behalf of Colapinto from race control there. We're just getting a look at Max Verstappen.
I think what's happened here, he might have been told to do a practice start, but told late, and he's missed the dedicated start box. To the right-hand side of the fast lane, there are 2 practice start boxes, and that is, according to the race director, where you have to do your practice starts from. The car's shut down. Verstappen now stuck in the fast lane. Marshall's looking at trying to push him and get him going again, but Verstappen's still sat there right now. So there's a lot to be learned, a lot to be figured out, and people are still going to be finding gremlins, I think, as we go right through these practice sessions, maybe through even the first part of this season. There's so much technical change on these brand new Formula 1 cars for 2026.
Oh, I feel like it's been quite an intense couple of minutes. 54 minutes and 4 seconds remain of this second free practice session. George Russell with the quickest time so far, a 1:21.3 on the hard tyre, followed by Antonelli a tenth behind in second, Hamilton third, Hadjar and Lawson the top 5. Let's head back down to pit lane. Jenny Gao. I don't think we have a Jenny Gao. We'll try and get her back, but in the meanwhile we're having a look at Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Now, just had a little look at some of the new bits that are on the cars for this year, one of them being Active Aero, and you can see we will be able to see the front wing and the rear wing opening, and this is the differentiation between straight line mode. When you're in a straight line, the Active Aero, the wings open a bit like what we're used to seeing with DRS, but it is not any kind of replacement for that. DRS is gone, and then they close back up when they hit the brakes for corner mode. As you can imagine, that's through the corners. One of the most intriguing designs I think we saw in testing, very briefly, was Ferrari's rear wing that pretty much did a full invert when the rear wing was opened. Doesn't look like they brought that one for this first round, at least.
Yeah, it was a real innovative solution. So, just a different way of approaching that Active Aero solution. And actually, a couple of teams, a couple of different manufacturers have looked at that new system in different ways. So there's 3 or 4 different versions of how the flap on the rear wing opens and closes. Ferrari came up with something very extreme, turned a lot of heads, raised a few eyebrows, but yes, it was something they only, I think, ran for 1 lap in testing. Got everybody's attention, but it doesn't look like they've got it here. It might be one of those things that for certain circuits it may be more beneficial. It may be that actually it's too complicated, comes with a weight penalty in terms of how it operates, and maybe it's just worked out that it's not necessarily the one to go for here.
Meanwhile, I think we've got Jenny back. Can you hear us, Jen?
There was a glitch in the matrix, so hopefully
I think we're still glitching in the matrix, Jenny, so we'll try and come back to you before the next 52 minutes elapses. I've just had a little look at the race director's notes, just to come back to that Russell and Lindblad incident in the pit lane, and I think Russell will be done for that, because out of the 2 white lines that differentiate the fast lane and the pit lane, it's the one closer to the fast lane that you have to have your wheel on or over, which George Russell did not. And that is under investigation now by the FIA.
Yeah, as is the Colapinto incident for driving unnecessarily slowly in the fast lane. We referenced it earlier on. Lewis Hamilton approaching incredibly quickly in a Ferrari, managed to avoid what would have been a big accident. So that one also, the stewards having a little look at. I think there's going to be quite a lot of this going on. As I said, there's so much to learn, so many new systems and new procedures that people have to get right. I think the stewards are going to play a role, particularly in the early races this season, and that's on top of all the normal stuff, the track limits and the things like that we're all used to, the technical violations, the technical checks that are going to have to go on over the course of these first few races are new to everybody to a large extent. So there's a lot of learning to be had, not just from the drivers and teams, but from the rule makers. For us as commentators and everybody watching and listening back home, there's going to be an awful lot to learn, which I think makes it truly exciting season we've got ahead of us.
I couldn't agree more. Just having a look, Aston Martin watch. Lance Stroll has taken to the track and done 2 laps and is now back into the pit lane. Fernando Alonso has not exited to the track.
On that, it's worth saying that Newey was saying that what they've done is put what they hope is a fix, or at least a first attempt at a fix, to this vibration issue affecting the battery on Stroll's car, and they were going to analyse it today. It may well be in that case that Alonso's car doesn't have that fix on it, and therefore they daren't risk his car because it would probably just break the battery if he went out the pits with it.
Quite possibly so. No Max Verstappen either after having that problem at the end of the pit lane and being wheeled back into his garage. No Sergio Perez either in the Cadillac. Lando Norris is back in the pit lane. He has been out there for McLaren and done a couple of laps as the investigation for Colapinto driving unnecessarily slowly will be investigated after the session by the stewards. Lando Norris had a couple of, well, there was a bit of some gearbox problems, some power unit issues going on for both McLaren drivers, affected Norris more so. Piastri was able to kind of regain a bit of power for the majority of the session, but McLaren certainly a little bit on the back foot after free practice 1, but up front at the moment with 49 minutes and 26, 25, 24 remaining. It's Hamilton quickest on the hard tyre, a 1:29.03, just shy of a tenth quicker than George Russell. Then it's Piastri, Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, the top 5. Hadjar is 6th ahead of Hulkenberg's Audi. Then it's Lawson, Gasly and Lindblad, who impressed in FP1, who's just been actually demoted to 11th because Pierre Gasly has got himself up inside the top 10. Bortoletto 12th, Colapinto, Ocon, Albon the top 15. Then comes Behrman and Bottas 17th, with Norris the last to set any kind of lap time. Stroll 19th ahead of Verstappen, Perez and Alonso, who, as I just said, have not taken to the track.
Yeah, and Antonelli now pops in the fastest time of anybody in the Mercedes. So the Ferraris have been consistently quick throughout testing. We've all been talking about Mercedes being potential pace setters as well. The top 4 teams over the last couple of years are likely to be the top 4 teams again. We think that's the case at the moment. The order within that top 4 is very, very difficult to predict at this point, and it's such an early stage in the weekend, as we keep saying, with so much learning to be had. I think that order might be shuffled continuously, not even just through this weekend, but through the first part of this season, as people get to grips with the technology, but also bring developments, bring new components to their car. This is going to be a massive development race, perhaps more than any we've had in the last few years throughout the 2026 season. So no matter what the pace order is at the end of this weekend, that is not the one that's going to be set in stone for the rest of this season. So I think lots to keep an eye on.
Lots to keep an eye on, including down in Fernando Alonso's side of the Aston Martin garage, where he is being strapped in, helmet on, and signs pointing towards an Alonso on track. We'll keep an eye on that. I'm sure Jenny will be down there and watching like a hawk, so we'll keep you updated with that. Meanwhile, I'll tell you actually who we haven't spoken about at all. We only had one session, but it's the Haas drivers. We're currently looking at Oliver Behrman, back for his 2nd season in Formula 1. He's down in 16th at the moment, but he's on a quick lap. Esteban Ocon is also out there. He's in 4th. Now, this was one of the teams, Mark, I think they're actually also impressed in testing as the best of the rest team. They got an awful lot of mileage, and I was thinking back to this time last year where they were pretty much plumb last. They had a really tough time, and Behrman had a couple of big crashes across the weekend too.
Yeah, I think what we can say, the midfield battle, I talked a moment ago about what we think the top 4 is likely to be, the same sort of top 4, but the midfield battle has become perhaps even more interesting now, because if you think about the likes of Alpine, who were right at the very back last year, they've now upgraded to or changed to a Mercedes power unit. That's put them right further up into the mix. I think you're right. Haas have quietly gone about their business, gradually improving things. Audi have been dropped in as a new organisation, new team with their own power unit, and they are slap bang in the middle of all that fight as well. So there's a huge opportunity in that midfield. Williams have maybe taken a step backwards. There's a big opportunity with small gains here and there. Getting a few things right could catapult you from somewhere towards the back to just behind that top 4 without taking any giant leaps in performance. Just not making mistakes could be the thing that gets you there.
Big news. We've got action down on Fernando Alonso's side of the garage. The car has been fired up. The engineers remove the tyre warmers. It's a set of soft tyres as Alonso creeps out into the sunlight, which illuminates the green Aston Martin car. It's right hand down into the fast lane of the pit lane, 80 kilometres an hour as he trundles towards the end. And Alonso takes to the track for the first time this weekend ahead of round 1 of the 2026 Formula 1 season.
And we should say, actually, to give a perspective of just how serious the problems are at Aston Martin, Andrew's given a really good account of what's going on there. But even before this weekend, comments from the drivers, Alonso and Stroll, talking about not being able to do more than 25 laps in the case of Alonso before he might suffer permanent nerve damage in his hands. So bad were the vibrations in that car. So, you know, they will be pinning all hopes on this fix, not just from a technical point of view, but from a drivability perspective, because otherwise you don't need to be a genius to work out there is no way they're going to get to the end of a Grand Prix, even if they manage to start it.
But there's also another element going on Aston Martin, because they had a bit of a change in their technical team over the weekend. Fernando Alonso's actually got a new voice in his ear for this year. It's a known voice to him as Isaac Hadjar has a little bit of a moment in his Red Bull coming out of the fast right-hander of turn 5 that sets you up to head down under the trees through to turn 6. He manages to gather it up, but Alonso's actually got a new name in his ear, a new voice in his ear, and a bit of a reshuffling of his engineering crew. Chris Cronin is now going to be the man that we hear in his ear. It's a known voice and a known face to him, just a bit of swapping around. And talk of Alonso going very slowly, approaching the left-hander, the fast turn left-hander of 9 and then the right-hander of 10, but I think he's just getting out of the way, is he? Or is this continuing to just absolutely go as slowly as you can for Fernando Alonso? Picking up the pace now, you can hear that Honda engine starting to rev back into life. I think perhaps he was just getting out of the way of some faster cars.
Well, time will tell. He's continuing on the lap at this point, but yeah, I think that the problem they've got, amongst many others, is there are so many issues. You know, they're firefighting rather than even considering thinking about performance. So getting around a lap is their biggest challenge right now, let alone trying to think about lap time. And if you're, you know, a Fernando Alonso with dreams of one more world championship before you might retire, and the whole jigsaw puzzle coming together with Adrian Newey and the money of Aston Martin, the facilities they've got, the Honda power unit, all of those elements seem on paper like such perfect contributions to what you need to win a title, and it's just gone so horribly wrong at this point. What we should say, I guess, is if Honda are able to come up with a solution, if they can find a fix to these vibrational issues where they get the power unit running sweetly at some point, even if it's not at the start of the season, is that car going to be good enough? The problem is nobody knows at the moment because they simply can't do any laps.
Well, he has made it round the final corner, Fernando Alonso, and he's coming into sector 2 now, so he is embarking on his first proper lap. We're listening to the sounds of Lando Norris, the reigning champion, the man with the number 1 on that Papaya McLaren, the first time the number 1 has been on a McLaren since Jenson Button, back in 2010 that would have been. He's making his way through the 90-degree right-hander now, runs out a little bit wide onto the rumble strip, but not too wide before the gravel comes to meet you. Then there'll be another 90-degree right-hander through 12, which is slightly less than that, where you gather it up to the right-hand side, break into 13, through the left-hander, hit the overtake detection button, the overtake mode, a new option for drivers this year where you get an extra half a megajoule deployed. It's activated under the same parameters as DRS was when you're within a second of the car in front during the race, and it can be used at the same time as boost mode as well, and you can use it for free in practice and qualifying as well, but in a race you've got to be within a second of the car in front of you as he completes a lap. Let's head back down to Jenny.
Yes, just talking about McLaren, they switched over the gearbox and had a good look at it in between FP1 and FP2. Obviously Norris didn't get out and do a proper test because I think he only did 6-7 laps, so frustrating for them, but it was just a precaution, and it managed to put the gearbox back in, so that's relatively good news, and obviously more running this time. And now I've just walked myself down to Red Bull, and the mechanics are forming a guard and a bit of a shield so that the cameraman can't get a good eye on Max Verstappen's car, but the front wing is off, and it looks like they're having a look at the hydraulics and all of the stuff that's the liquid and stuff that's at the front of the car, just by the driver's feet actually. So they're having a look at that, and as soon as I've got an update for you I can give it to you, but no sign of Max going out anytime soon.
Yeah, thanks Jenny. I think, is this maybe the first sort of proper reliability issue we've seen from the Red Bull? We don't know quite the indication yet, but the point I want to make is this Red Bull powertrain that they've been working on. You know, this is an energy drinks company that somehow made a Formula One team, and now they're building their own engines. It's in partnership with Ford, who come on board to help. So it's the return of a big American brand to Formula One, teaming up with another massive brand in Red Bull. And I think it's been quite remarkable how they've gone so far. I think a lot of people were expecting them maybe to have almost the kind of Honda troubles that we're seeing.
Yeah, and actually I think inside Red Bull powertrains themselves, I don't think they had anywhere near the confidence that current performance has kind of shown they perhaps could have had going into the testing programme. They were pleasantly surprised. So they've done a remarkable job so far. We have no idea, of course, at this point what's going on with Verstappen's car. He stopped at the end of the pit lane on his way out to start a lap. So it could be something really quite simple and straightforward. It could be more detailed, we don't know. But I think one of the interesting things we're seeing here is a shift from what we saw in FP1, where now the Mercedes teams look like they've probably got their power unit turned up. There's an argument to say here, for whatever reason, whether it's for reliability or whatever, they may have had their performance, their power units not running at maximum power in session 1, because all of the Mercedes power teams were certainly behind the Ferrari teams and the Red Bull teams. Now at this point, and we'll caveat it by saying there's still a long way to go, we're definitely seeing Russell now on top, his teammate Antonelli just behind him. The McLaren of Oscar Piastri now jumps into that top 3 or 4 position. So the Mercedes power units, or the Mercedes powered teams, definitely back in the mix in FP2.
The fastest time from Russell is a 1:20.049. The lap record is a 1:19.813, just to give you a kind of comparison as to where we're at with times at the moment. Then it's just over a tenth and a half between Russell to his teammate Antonelli. Then nearly 6 tenths back is Lewis Hamilton, but Hamilton is on the hard tyre compared to the two Mercedes who've gone out there on the soft tyre. Piastri 4th, Leclerc 5th, Hadjar 6th, ahead of Hülkenberg and Bortoletto. Lawson and Sainz complete the top 10. Gasly is 11th, ahead of the two Haas cars. Ocon, then Oliver Behrman. And I don't know if that, I just caught a glimpse of that. We're getting a close-up shot of Nico Hülkenberg's cockpit. And it just looked like he was shoving the cameraman away and telling him to get out of his face while he was sat in the cockpit there. Doesn't want him to get too close to see all the good stuff that they're working on. And then after Behrman comes Norris in 14th. Albon completes the top 15. Lindblad, Colapinto, Bottas and Stroll, 19 drivers who have been out there. Fernando Alonso did 4 laps and then came in, so he's registered as 20th. Max Verstappen yet to go out with his issues, and Sergio Perez has also not made it out yet in his Cadillac, and I'm told they are struggling with a sensor issue that is keeping him confined to the garage for the time being.
Yeah, difficult. I think I was just chatting to some of the guys down at Cadillac in between the sessions, and the effort that's gone in from everybody in that organisation just to get to this point. And I guess you can put it into some context when you compare it to the plight of Aston Martin right now, who are experienced, well-funded. They've got, kind of everything they should have to make this work. And yet Cadillac have come in from scratch and have really done quite a remarkable job just to get 2 cars on track, to get through testing in the way they have. Yes, they haven't got anywhere near the performance of the teams at the front, but that's exactly what we expected, and that's really the difference between those 2 teams. What we expected from Aston Martin was something far greater than what we've got, and the expectation versus reality at Cadillac is actually much similar, and so they can be reasonably happy with their starting point, and there's going to be so much room to progress from here. So I think they're doing okay right now.
Yeah, Jenny, I think you've headed down to Cadillac, have you? What can you see?
I have, and I can see Sergio Perez's car up on its blocks. He's not in it, released of his duty time being. They are hopeful that he'll get back out in this session at some point. But there are about 8 mechanics working feverishly, and they look trying to remove the floor, because that's where most of the sensors are kept in the so they'll remove that, and then they'll have a look around and see what's actually going on. Sometimes the sensor doesn't mean there's a fault, it just means the sensor is up, as a warning light in your car sometimes does. So Sergio Perez to my left is just with his performance engineer and his race engineer going over some of the details. It's nice to see him back, actually. It's been a while, hasn't it? But he looks happy. You say Cadillac, 4 years in the making. And as I say that, I think if I just go to the other side of the garage, yes, Valtteri Bottas is just about to leave the garage in the 77 car. Thumbs up. Chief mechanic sends him out, and off he goes.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Then good news, being able to head out. 36 minutes on the clock ticks by. Russell continues to head round along with Kimi Antonelli, both Mercedes out on track, and they are the top 2 at the moment as Antonelli heads through turn 1. Now back for another bite at the cherry in his 2nd season, the 19-year-old from Bologna, the youngest pole sitter in Formula 1, the 3rd youngest podium sitter in Formula 1, managed to get 2 podiums to his name last year. And actually, I think really started to... He had a very up and down rookie season, did Kimi Antonelli. pressure heaped on him, well, since before he actually became a Formula One driver, since that big crash in free practice 1 in Monza the year before last. But I feel like towards the end of the last year, it seemed like he had gathered things up a bit and the development was there and he was scoring and showing well.
Yeah, it's a massively steep learning curve, isn't it, coming into Formula One, particularly at such a young age. Let's not forget, he was replacing Lewis Hamilton. I mean, stepping into incredibly big shoes at the Mercedes team. So I think you can look at his rookie year and say it was pretty decent. It was a solid basis to work from. He's got a great relationship with his teammates, George Russell, who's a real kind of seasoned pro now within this world. So I think the pair of them together are in a pretty good state. I'd say they're running in this session an offset strategy to pretty much everyone else. So the two Mercedes still running round on the soft tyre as Antonelli just pops in a fastest lap, so a 10th quicker than his teammate. But they're running around on the fastest soft tyre. Everyone else at the moment doing a different programme on a combination of mediums or harder tyres. So the lap time's a little bit irrelevant, but it's interesting they're doing something quite different. Could it be to hide their performance versus everybody else? Could it be they weren't able to turn engines up this morning and we're now seeing their sort of full performance out on display? We will see a bit later on, but at the moment it's the two Mercedes who top the timesheets.
It certainly is. By the way, if you're up early this morning, fair play to you, and if you'd like to get in touch with any thoughts or comments or questions, you can do so on X. Just use the hashtag BBCF1 and we will endeavour to get that answered. I'll talk about it for you for the next half an hour or so of this final bit of F1 track running for the day. Behrman out there at the moment, personal best from the British driver in the Haas car, down in 14th. We'll see where he comes across the line. He's on the soft tyre through the left-hander, and then that feeds you into the final corner, a right-hander that slings you out onto the start-finish straight line mode, activated, the wings open as he crosses the line and puts that Haas up into 6th place. Behind his teammate, though, Esteban Ocon, about a 10th separating those two. Lando Norris is going to be the next one to come across the line. Only manages 12th, though, but he's on the harder compound tyre.
Yeah, and for Lando Norris, as Jenny mentioned earlier on, almost no running this morning. So all of the learning that happened for almost everybody else in that first practice session is now having to happen for Norris in FP2. So they're a little bit on the back foot, a little bit behind schedule. And giving the context of where we are with all of these huge changes, the biggest technical change that Formula One has ever had in one go going into a season, learning and laps are exactly what you need. So Lando's slightly on the back foot. We think they've got pace in the car. We know the Mercedes power unit is definitely up there in the mix as one of the best. So I don't think we need to be too worried about the two McLarens at this stage.
I think George Russell has had a moment down at turn 3, just caught the end of it. Might have been a lock-up that forced him wide as he gathers that Mercedes back up and makes his way down towards turn number 6 through the trees. He emerges back into the sunlight of Melbourne.
A bit covered in dust, doesn't it? Like he's been at a little excursion somewhere.
Yeah, he has. Now, I think he must have been down at turn 3 and he's cut the corner somewhere. I'm sure we'll get another look at it. Indeed, on cue, and it's a front right lock-up. Yeah. And he actually made it into the gravel.
Yeah.
And managed to slide it all the way through for George Russell, who was exuding confidence on Thursday during the press conference, looking to continue a streak of, at the moment, 16 races in the points. In fact, I was looking back at his qualifyings from last year, top 6 in every single race, bar Monaco last year. It was his most impressive season to date.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people have George Russell down as a championship favourite potentially, albeit this early in the season. But that really is testament to just how well he's progressed, just how good and what a talent we think he is. If the car is a good one, if we think it's as good as it potentially could be at Mercedes, there's no reason why he couldn't be in championship contention. Just going back to his little lock-up there, I think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges from a driving perspective this year. We saw a lot of lock-ups in testing over the 2 weeks in Bahrain, actually a lot of them from George Russell, from the Mercedes particularly, but it's a challenge because of the way the cars work now. We're using this electric motor in a very different way on the rear axle, both to generate power, so to deploy some of the electrical energy from the battery, but also to harvest and to recharge that battery. And that does most of your braking for you on the rear axle. So it's a little bit different to the way that, a basic car brakes, where you hit the brake pedal, the hydraulic system clamps a set of pads around discs. That's how it works on the front axle, but at the rear, it's all electronically controlled now. So something else, where it's happening at different stages and different parts of the racetrack, the drivers have to really get on top of understanding how that changes the feel of the car, how it changes the balance going into braking. And we're seeing an awful lot of lockups as a result of that.
And we certainly are, as we hear the sounds of Charles Leclerc head towards the right-hander down at turn 11. In the meantime, I think we've got a little more Aston Martin news. Jenny, you're outside the team.
Yes, this is a much better session. Fernando Alonso has just gone back out on track. So both cars running around this Albert Park circuit. Jolly good.
Jolly good indeed. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, well, I'm sure they'll be praying to somebody that the batteries hold out with only 2 remaining for the rest of the weekend. We're not expecting them to complete a full Grand Prix on Sunday. They don't think they'll be able to. Fernando Alonso is saying, due to the vibrations that they're struggling with the engine onto the chassis of the car, that after any more than 30 laps, and he will struggle. Lance Stroll even less, saying 15. So still work to do, and a lot of it for Aston Martin. There's work going on in the Mercedes garage as well. Max Verstappen, I think he went back out. He did. He has made it back out after his early problems. He's done 3 laps now, Max Verstappen, out on the medium tyre, and has just slotted his Red Bull into 15th place.
Yeah, and so as we were just saying about with Lando Norris losing track time, and obviously the Aston Martins, it's so valuable. Track time is so valuable right now. If we think about fast forwarding a few races time, when we get to the first sprint race, when you only have 1 practice session, it's going to be incredibly difficult for teams to understand. It's not just about how the car's behaving and figuring out things like the setup to make the driver happy in these cars, but it's also hugely about how you figure out strategically how to harvest and deploy this huge amount of energy stored in the battery, because it contributes so much of your overall performance now. So there's a massive amount of effort going on here at the racetrack, also back at the team's factories, to learn the best way around this racetrack from a strategic point of view. They're doing that this week over 2 practice sessions. When we get to a sprint race, that gets cut down to 1, with all of the other things you have to learn as well.
Lewis Hamilton finding time, staying third for now, and his Ferrari sliding out of the last 2 corners as Max Verstappen continues to embark on another lap. Arvid Lindblad also out there, 7th at the moment on the soft tyre, 1.1 seconds back. Quietly, not quietly, he loudly impressed, I thought, in free practice 1, and at the moment it is still practice, but I feel like he's got the better of Liam Lawson, who is about 3/10 behind him.
Yeah, and Verstappen's just completed his lap, albeit on the medium tyre. Very similar lap time to Lindblad, but as I said, very early in the session for Verstappen after those early troubles that meant he conked out at the end of the pit lane. So there's more to come from Verstappen, and we think, and everything that we've seen in testing so far has pointed to the fact that we know how good he is. That car is right in the mix alongside the Mercedes and the Ferrari. So this really is a very difficult one to call in terms of overall performance so far this weekend.
Lindblad pops himself up into 6th. That puts Hadjar down to 7th in that second Red Bull. Isaac Hadjar, the Frenchman, getting the promotion, with Yuki Tsunoda occupying that seat, demoted to reserve driver, as we get a look at Franco Colapinto running deep into turn 3, sliding out onto the exit curb, all crossed up, and his pink and blue Alpine dips a wheel onto the grass as well. Scrappy session so far from the Argentine.
It was another lockup, actually, very similar to George Russell's earlier on in the session. So the lockup put him wide. He then buried his foot onto the throttle pedal. There's so much power now under the driver's right foot, particularly with the electrical deployment. As we said in practice 1, anyone who's driven at home an electric car or an electric hybrid knows how that instant torque, the performance that comes with that, really turns your car into a bit of a rocket ship. Well, the Formula 1 drivers, and they're used to a lot of performance, a lot of power, are even saying this year there's so much explosive power out of the corners, it's surprising them, it's taking them back. So they've got to be really careful about how they deploy that power. They've got to be a bit measured in it, because if they just bury their throttle, bury the right foot, you're going to spin up the rear wheels, you're going to overcook the tyres, and we know how that is detrimental to performance.
Just got a glimpse of Carlos Sainz there out of the car. Helmet on, though. Down in 16th at the moment for Williams. Alex Albon with the 14th fastest time at the moment. We know Williams behind on schedule when it came to the launch of the car. They missed the Barcelona shakedown whilst they made it to Bahrain and did get some valuable laps and mileage under their belt. Very much behind the curve with a hugely overweight car, it's been reported. But I wonder, when you're coming back to the different methods of deployment and the energy management that we're going to be seeing across the year, so crucial, when it comes, and I think we talked about this in either FP1 or a podcast, they all merge into one at the moment, but a driver can really make a difference when it comes to if your lap in qualifying might be hindered and you've got to gather things back up again, or if you find yourself battling away in a race and struggling to get past a car, you end up in wheel-to-wheel action. A driver has to be able to adapt and understand ways of deploying their energy and be able to do it better than somebody else. And there are only certain types of driver that kind of maybe have that capacity, and Carlos Sainz might be one of them. We know he's a bit of an engineer in his mind and driver. Look at that fantastic win in Singapore where he kept Lando Norris within his DRS for so many laps to make sure that the Ferrari behind, the Mercedes behind couldn't get through. So I just wonder if we're going to see that kind of make more of a difference this year when it comes to drivers adapting to the energy management.
Yeah, 100%. I think the workload of a driver, not just physically, but I think mentally has gone up. There's so much more for them to be across and be on top of. So I think you're right. The drivers who have that sort of engineering brain, Science is one of those. You could think of Lewis Hamilton. It could swing back towards suiting drivers like that who have the capacity to not just drive the car but to be thinking strategically from the cockpit. The teams, of course, will help them with all of this, and the teams will play a big part, but I think you're right. The drivers who are able to multitask in that way are perhaps going to have a bigger opportunity to make a difference here. So, yeah, lots to keep an eye on. I think, as I said, not only are the cars very different and the teams and the swinging performance within those teams is shuffling the order, but I think even within teams we're going to see the driving styles of some drivers suit these cars in a different way than they might have suited them last year. So the order, I think, is going to be shuffled in lots of different ways and continue to be shuffled as everyone starts to figure it out.
23 minutes and 5, 4, 3 seconds remain of free practice 2. It's Oscar Piastri who's now the benchmark lap time with a 1:19.729 on the soft tyre. Antonelli Russell, who switched onto the hard tyre, now second and third. Hamilton, Leclerc, the top 5. Verstappen, making up for a lost time, has just crossed the line and gone 6th fastest ahead of Arvid Lindblad, Hajar, Ocon and Behrman, the top 10. Nico Hulkenberg's Audi is 11th ahead of Liam Lawson. Gabby Bortoletto is 13th ahead of Alex Albon. Then comes Lando Norris, the top 15. Norris, who struggled with gearbox issues in the first session, making up for lost ground. Sainz down in 16th ahead of the 2 Alpines. Gasly and Colapinto, as that's the sound of Lewis Hamilton a few moments ago, locking up once again,
exactly
down into
place.
turn 3. Yeah, that front right, and you have no other option but to go into the gravel at that stage.
Yeah, so pretty much identical to we saw from Russell and Colapinto. Same thing, just snatching the right tyre. As soon as you lock up, we know what happens. You can't get the car turned in. You do run wide, and on that particular corner, you find yourself in a gravel trap. Momentum got him through it, so he's not beached, he's not stuck. He lives to fight another day. But there's an awful lot of positivity, I think, around Ferrari and around Lewis Hamilton in general right now. I think, given how low he came off the back of last year, how he went into the winter almost in such a depressed state, it was actually really quite sad watching the end of that season play out, particularly on his side of the garage. I think he went away and he's taken the view, and I think I knew he would, because he's not the sort to give up. He was going to fight for this. He's gone away to try and rebuild himself, rebuild his own confidence. He says he's worked harder than ever before from a physical point of view. He is going to get a new race engineer. It's not coming for the start of the season, unfortunately, which is not ideal, but that's going to be a change as well. And he says he's got his own DNA in this car, having been part of the discussions around its design and its development. So he feels a real part of this particular Ferrari, and I think as a result of that, feels a little bit more comfortable in it. The way that the cars are being designed, as we just said, maybe suits his driving style a little bit more than the old ones did. So he may well get a better season, and at the moment he's definitely in the mix and in the conversation, which is where he needs to start.
As he crosses the line, 4th fastest, 3 tenths back from Oscar Piastri, couple of tenths clear of his teammate Charles Leclerc. Hamilton, an 8-time pole sitter around this Albert Park track, a 2-time winner back in 2008 and 2015. As we get Lando Norris setting sail and back out onto the track into the blazing sunshine. It started off the day actually quite cool and overcast, but it certainly has hotted up as the day and the hours have gone by. Air temperature 22.4 degrees, track temperature 34.4 degrees, humidity starting to creep up as well, about 66%. And having a look at the weather for the rest of the weekend, this is supposed to be the last of the sort of hot days, but we know Melbourne can really have all the seasons in one day. Just look back to Sunday race day last year, absolute chaos with the amount of times we had showers on and off that afternoon.
Made for a great spectacle, didn't it? I think if you're a neutral, it was fascinating to watch how that can shift things up. And we haven't really seen these brand new cars running in the wet, so that's a whole different thing when it finally gets around to that, and teams have to get to grips with that. There's changes to procedures around things like active aero. Of course, when you've got limited amount of grip, flipping both your front and rear wings open, although it's only done in straight line modes, it changes the entire balance of the car. So I think there's an awful lot still to learn with these cars, and a change in weather is probably the last thing they needed on this opening weekend. So the fact it's looking like it's going to stay dry, from their point of view, is probably good. We've got most of the field in the pits at the moment, with just about a handful of about 5 or 6, 7 cars out on track. I think one of the interesting things, particularly when we get to qualifying tomorrow, is going to be how busy the circuit gets. Don't forget, we've got 2 extra cars on the grid this year, 22 cars with the extra team in Cadillac, and fighting for position or creating the gap on the circuit that you need ahead of qualifying, whilst charging this battery up in this whole new kind of way of having to manage that energy harvesting, is going to be, I think, a very, very busy first part of qualifying, and potentially treacherous. So something that both the teams, the drivers, but also the FIA are going to have to monitor and watch very, very closely, because drivers running around at very different speeds whilst they harvest energy, some on flying laps, some preparing for flying laps, I think it's going to be a real tricky challenge.
And in terms of how qualifying will work this year, we'll lose 1 extra car from Q1 and Q2 because of Cadillac's entry, bringing up the total to 22 cars on the grid from 20. So we keep Q3 as a top 10 shootout, so we just eliminate an extra driver in Q2. And in that first Q1 session, when we get going for qualifying, which will certainly be one to tune in for on Saturday. And we'll be getting going early in the morning for that one, about 5 o'clock in the morning for you. So the first proper power hour of the year to look forward to. 17 and a half minutes left of free practice 2. Piastri currently fastest, his teammate Lando Norris making his way round the final corner. Now let's just see where this puts Norris in that second Papaya car as he comes towards the line. Not the best middle sector. Second off Piastri, down in 7th on that soft tyre. Norris with a truncated start to this session. Up in the comments box with you, it's Harry Benjamin, former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, and down patrolling pit lane is Jenny Gow.
And I've noticed something relatively interesting, well, interesting to me anyway, just watching some of the drivers take a practice start to the right-hand side of the pit lane. The Racing Bulls seem to create a lot of exhaust fumes off the back of the car. In fact, so much that at one point I thought they had a little fire at the back of the car, but no, it's just the way that the fuel, which is new for this year, synthetic fuel, and the way it's burnt, is giving like an exhaust trail almost as much as a rooster tail. So it's definitely something very different to watch from down here.
Yeah, certainly is. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, fuel is another thing that's changed for this year with advanced sustainable fuel with a carbon neutral requirement here, and all of the teams firming up technology partnerships with all the big fuel suppliers from across the world, and really fuel quality can have a huge impact actually, and that technology being developed as well by the fuel suppliers with the Formula One teams.
It's also worth saying, the idea is that this could become something. At the moment, these fuels are very expensive, but that's for Formula One cars. The idea is that these could become marketed, and that people could use them in their road cars, and that would completely change the marketplace in terms of electric versus internal combustion engines, because you wouldn't in theory, you wouldn't need electric mobility to keep carbon emissions down, because you've got carbon neutral fuel in your internal combustion engine.
And that's, again, the overriding reason why there's such a big overhaul when it comes to the regulations for this year. Formula One, the pinnacle of motorsport, wants to encourage big automotive brands to stay and to join the sports. And to do that, you need road relevancy. You need that trickle-down effect. And that's one of the reasons why we got rid of that, the MGU-H, the heat part of the internal combustion engine prior to this regulation change, because that wasn't really any use for anybody on the roads anymore. So it's a reason why Audi have come in. It's a reason why Cadillac have come in, and while several big name partners are now part of Formula One again. I'll get off the PR train in a minute, but that is the general sense of why we keep talking about this huge regulation overhaul. Well, it's to stay relevant.
Yeah, and you've got to say, at least on that basis, it's been successful, hasn't it? Because it's brought in Audi, it's brought in Ford, it's brought in major manufacturers. So if that's what they set out to achieve, then that's great. Of course, we have to do that while still maintaining entertaining racing. We want to see a big development push from these teams. We want to see these cars being the pinnacle of motorsport, and I think that's still what we've got. It's going to be something very different, and I think from a fan's perspective, if you're watching or listening to this, trying to get your head around it, there's an awful lot to get your head around. It is, no doubt, it's complex, but it is for the teams. They're still getting their heads around it, and I think whenever there's something brand new, it's easy to say, well, it's way too complicated. I think give it a bit of time. Give this, come into this with an open mind. The cars look great on the circuit. They are smaller, they're shorter, they're narrower, they're lighter by about 30 kilos, a little bit more nimble. And we've been crying out for that for years in Formula One, to stop cars getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We've got that. So I think if we can get on top of this and this becomes normalised to everybody, which it will in a very short space of time, I think this could end up being a really entertaining and really good formula for Formula One. So only time will tell what that does to the racing, and this is the first opportunity we're going to get this weekend to see exactly what effect it has. But I think the intrigue is massive, and the hype around this is bigger than we've had as far back as I can remember in this sport. Yeah, just when I thought, we had the Drive to Survive effect and everything, and I thought Formula One was just beginning to plateau a little bit. But it's just suddenly the star continues to rise once again, which is brilliant to see. And we want to welcome as many people into the sport as possible to enjoy, hopefully, some brilliant racing on a Sunday afternoon, and that spectacle remain alive with cars that are able to go side by side and fight, and you're able to see and feel like you are able to connect with not only the personality of the sport, but also with what you're maybe driving on the road, compared to what Kimi Antonelli is driving right now, which is the sound you're hearing in his Mercedes powered and built car. Currently second fastest, 2/10 drift of Oscar Piastri when he was on the soft tyre earlier on. He's now switched to the hard tyre. The Pirelli tyres have changed for this year. We've got narrower tyres, so less grip, easier to slide, maybe a bit more driver influence required. Still got the 18-inch rims, but basically the front tyres have been made about 25 millimetres narrower. Rear tyres about 30 millimetres narrower, and again it's about that efficiency, isn't it? Yeah, it is. So it's a sort of a smaller frontal area, which makes it much more aero efficient cutting through the air, so that's the reason behind it. One little side note to that, I think you could easily see this season that world record pit stop being broken. The wheels and tyre combination is lighter as a result of it being smaller. Also, the teams have now got the ability to design their own rims, their own wheels, as in past few years that's been a sort of standard configuration that everybody's had to use. So I think the combination of that might mean that remarkable 1.8 second pit stop that McLaren have held the record since Qatar 23 could actually get broken. And so for pit stop fans, and I'm one of those, I think we could see something quite remarkable happening this year. I haven't told you this, I'm going to have a go at a pit stop. Are you? In a couple of months. I'm going down to Haas, and I'm going to have a go at every single job involved in a pit crew. If you need some pointers, I know. I think I'll be calling you down. Right, just got a bit of team radio, did we not? With Aston Martin, and was it Lance Stroll's radio? And I think he's got an issue and is coming back into the pits. Let's do a bit of a tally, because Fernando Alonso is out there at the moment and he's managed to do 10 laps. Lance Stroll, who is coming in imminently, has done
13 laps. So it's a darn sight better than what they were able to do in free practice 1, but still nowhere near what they're able to do. Sergio Perez, though, still confined to the garage. Sensor issue on his Cadillac. And it was interesting actually hearing Graham Loudon in the interim being asked about, well, how was your first practice session as your brand new team? And they celebrate, we got Verstappen off into the gravel on the exit of turn 10, rally style over the grass, manages to gather it all up and rejoins the track with a faster car right by him, but he keeps going, doesn't get out of the way, but his wheels now covered in dust from that gravel. Hairy moment there for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it was very, very high-speed stuff, and you're right, he was an absolute passenger for most of it. Here's the replay that we see. So as he turns in, so the second part, had a tiny snap of oversteer mid-corner, which put him wide over the curb, dipped into the gravel, and he was a passenger. I mean, luckily he was. There's enough space, enough runoff area to keep him well out of the wall, but the underside of that car will be absolutely pebble-dashed. The sensitive components around the edge of the floor and the barge boards will be absolutely destroyed after rallying through that gravel trap there. Bits flying off in the background as we see a slow motion replay. So not ideal for Verstappen, but a real sign of just how hard he's pushing there. Just to come back to the Aston Martin dramas, of course what they'll be hoping with that problem with Lance Stroll is that it's not another battery issue. We heard in the team principal's press conference they only have 2 batteries left from the 4 that they came to Australia with. There are simply no more, and it seems to be the weakest link in their whole power unit dramas at the moment. So with Aston Martin, with Lance Stroll doing 13 laps and now reporting an issue, they will all be crossing their fingers that that's not the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, more news from the pit lane. Jenny Gow.
Yes, we'll start with Carlos Sainz, the Williams. He's in the garage. They're investigating a problem with the car. They're not saying what it is, but he will not return out to run in FP2 any further. Alan just stood in front of Lance Stroll down at Aston Martin. The Honda men are in their white shirts. Everyone else is wearing green, of course. And they're just about to take the engine cover off Lance Stroll's car. Don't know what the damage is, don't know how severe and fundamental it is, but there's a watching brief.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So, reliability issues rearing their heads and keeping everybody on their toes. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc a few moments ago, having a moment into turn 1, having to run out wide onto the grass, avoids the gravel, but again, another moment that we'll see a lot of, and actually does take a big plume of it looks like something, a bit of gravel that's being dumped on the grass, but able to carry on going. We have got Sergio Perez out in the Cadillac, having been confined to the garage for, the entire session up till now, with just over 7.5 minutes left, which is good to see. And actually it comes back to what I was saying about Graham Loudon, being asked how was your first FP1 session, and he was like, well, it was great. It's actually the first time we've ever run 2 cars. Yeah. Which is a very fair point, because in testing, you only get one, and you've got to swap them between both drivers. So he was saying it was actually a bit manic in the garage, because suddenly we've got 2 teams working on 2 cars at the exact same time.
Yeah, and it does change things. It sounds like a really simple thing, but actually that changes everything about the way that the systems operate in the garage, how the garage, is physically set up, how the engineers talk to each other, how all of that information from 2 cars comes into the sort of central data processing, data analysis part of the organisation. So it really does change things having 2 operating at once. It's something they haven't been able to practice. They will, of course, have simulated it, and they've been running detailed simulations, race weekend simulations, for a long time now to try and put themselves in the best possible position. So they're as prepared as they can be, but there is nothing like getting your 2 physical actual cars onto the actual racetrack at the same time and getting real world data.
Certainly is. And I cast my mind back. I almost kind of discount Haas a little bit when they came into in 2016, because they bought so many Ferrari parts, and it was a whole kind of different regulation era that they came in. So I always go back to 2010. We had 3 new teams: Team Lotus that became Caterham, the Virgin Marussia Manor outfit, and then you had Hispania Racing. And I think it was Hispania Racing in particular they couldn't even make it out of the garage at all. They were barely able to make that 107% rule. I don't think they did make it. They weren't allowed to start that first race back in Australia. You look at that's why I sort of compare it to Cadillac, which yes, there's a lot of big players, a lot of money. We're in the cost cap era now, but there's a lot of work that's gone into this car, and as I say that, Sergio Perez has been told to stop the car. He's actually pulled up on the side of the road, I think just on the inside of before you get to turn 11, and so a problem there for Cadillac, and that's brought out the yellow flag. But it's still impressive to see that they are there. They did a lot of running in Bahrain, and when you compare them to where Aston Martin are, an established team with all the money in the world over the last few years to prepare for this entry, this regulation overhaul. I wonder if Aston Martin even make qualifying, and then again, are they going to make 107%?
Well, I think it's highly unlikely that they will make 107%, even if they get to take to the track. And that rule exists, of course, for really solid reasons. They don't want people taking part in an event where they're so far off the pace they become a hazard, they become a problem. Unfortunately, despite everything we know about the people involved and all those things you just mentioned, at the moment, Aston Martin are not in a position, they're not good enough to take the track alongside all of these other teams, and that's no disrespect to them. That is just a simple, that's what the situation is right now.
Virtual safety car out on track for Sergio Perez's Cadillac, having not been out for the majority of the session, managed to get out, and a lap and a half later has to pull to the side of the road and abandon ship on that front. More news in the last 4.5 minutes to go this session. Jenny, on Alpine, what have you got?
Yes, I'm just outside Pierre Gasly's garage, and he's out the car. It's up on its stands, and they are working on it. So I don't think there's going to be any more running for him. There's only about 4.25 minutes left. So not sure exactly what the problem was, but an early stop to running at Alpine.
I thought Alpine might be going a bit better at this stage, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, they've switched to a Mercedes power unit for this season, which certainly seems, at least from testing, to have catapulted them much further up into the midfield. I mean, they were starting from a very low point at the end of last season. So I think the fact that they've made that switch looking like it was the right decision, but there's still a huge amount to learn for that team. The fact they were so far back wasn't all about their power unit. They were making mistakes. They weren't quite optimising things. So they've still got things to improve and things to get better on, but the power unit, a definite step forward. Look, we've got, about 4 minutes left, and so that means that thing that everybody at home is waiting for, we've all been waiting for it for months now. The off-season is just not the same without this. It's time for this.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
Distance, we'll find out in the long run.
Well, here we go. First long run corner of the new season. There's not a lot of data to go on because there's been a mix of tyres at the top teams, but Mercedes and Ferrari have both run the hard tyre. Now, I've only got data for the two Ferrari drivers for 2 laps, whereas I've got Russell and Antonelli in the Mercedes for more like 9 or 10. But obviously they have a loss of performance over 10 laps. George Russell is by far the fastest with an average of 1 minute 23.565. That's 6/10 quicker than Kimi Antonelli and 9/10 quicker than Charles Leclerc, who's the quicker of the two Ferrari drivers by 2.5 tenths.
Wow.
Whoa.
Well, we talked about sandbagging in testing for Mercedes. Have they got so much more pace that they're just not really showing? I wonder if this is the beginning of it coming to bear. So that's interesting, isn't it?
What we don't have is McLaren data because they're on the softs, or Red Bull data because they're on the mediums. For what it's worth, Isaac Hadjar in the sort of second of the two Red Bulls, if you like, 1 minute 24.3. That's quicker than both Ferraris, but the Ferrari's on the hard tyre and he's on the medium.
So, producer Baddy's just said in my ear, we haven't got the Aston Martin data either, so we couldn't possibly compare. Sorry, we shouldn't laugh at their misery at the moment, but that is very interesting.
They could be in short run corner.
They could be in short run corner. How good is it to have long run corner back though? Months and months of waiting. Who's the voiceover? That's what I've always wondered. Who did the voice? Anyone notable? Victoria Turner. Shout out to BBC producer Victoria Turner. There we go. Right in the last few moments, you're hearing the sounds of Charles Leclerc clattering through the gravel. A classic front right lock up down at turn 3. Turns it in, locks up, no purchase, and off into the gravel he goes and kicks it up into the cockpit of that car for good measure too. Just a few minutes left actually of this session, or less than that. We've actually had a question come in from Jackie, who's actually here and is down at turn 14. Hi Jackie, great to have you with us. We finally have Alonso on track, very excited about that. Wondering if we can explain why the Aston Martin cars sound different to the others. Stroll especially has a rattle.
I bet he does.
I think it's because they're struggling with the Honda power unit,
Maybe,
Jackie.
yeah, Jackie, that's probably the vibration that you're hearing.
It might well be.
Imagine what it's like holding the steering wheel at 12,000 revs or whatever it is.
But it's interesting that the fact you can hear that in the grandstand as well. And I heard a lot of people saying you could hear the difference in the Audi engine as well, and how much louder that was as it was grunting past people on the straights during Bahrain testing because of that huge turbo that they've incorporated into their design.
I want to know aren't we geo-blocked in Australia? How's she getting BBC radio in
Andrew,
Australia?
that was my first question, but I thought I'm not going to throw Jackie under the bus. I'm not going to throw her under the bus. I know exactly how she's done
VPN
it.
is the answer, isn't it? Yeah,
not that we condone that kind of behaviour, Jackie, but great to have you with us on BBC F1.
One of the other things for Jackie and for everybody else is that because we've got such a different way of delivering power from these cars, there are a couple of different approaches to how you use the throttle. So even when you get sort of into a corner, instead of just lifting off and being on the brakes like you would imagine you tend to do through a corner where you're just trying to slow down and get through the apex, actually some teams are keeping that throttle working to some extent, keeping the engine running at relatively high revs, because what they do want is for the turbo to be spinning up when they get out the other side and to use that to harvest energy. So I think you'll be hearing quite a few different sounds at different parts of a lap because of the way teams are using these new power units.
Thank you, Mark. I think Jackie's either got a VPN or she thinks we're Alex Jakes and Jolyon Palmer on F1 TV on the F1 app. But I think she's hashtag BBC F1, so I'm confident she's on 5 Live. And that's all the airtime I'll be giving to other broadcasters right now.
Until you start working for one of them.
Hey! I love 5 Live. It's good to be back, isn't it? Right, clock's counting down to 0. Checkered flag is out at the end of free practice 2, and it's Oscar Piastri, fastest for McLaren by 0.2 of a second with a 1:19.729, the best lap of the session. Kimi Antonelli and George Russell second and third, but based off of our long run data, George Russell looking ominous in that Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton fourth, Charles Leclerc fifth, Max Verstappen after a slow start with issues sixth ahead of Norris. Arvid Lindblad continuing to impress. The rookie, the sole rookie, in the Racing Bulls is eighth, I should say, ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Esteban Ocon rounds out the top 10. Then it's Behrman, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Bortoletto and Alex Albon on the top 15. Pierre Gasly is 16th ahead of Carlos Sainz. Then it's Franco Colapinto in 18th, who is under investigation after this session for driving unnecessarily slowly right at the start and caught Lewis Hamilton unawares. Could have been an aeroplane accident, that one. Valtteri Bottas 19th. Fernando Alonso with 17 laps on the board. 20th. Lance Stroll managed 13. For a difficult day continuing down at Aston Martin. Sergio Perez as well with a tricky FP2 sensor issues, ultimately seeing him confined to the garage for the majority of this session. Managed to get out, but only managed a lap and a half before having to stop out onto the circuit. Practice starts underway then, Mark. Your biggest takeaways from FP2?
Biggest takeaway is that Mercedes turned things up for this session as opposed to the way they were running in FP1. Whether that was about preserving power units and reliability, or whether that was just the planned strategic way to approach the weekend. But that's, I think, something of interest. Other teams would have taken some notice from that performance, particularly that long-run performance from George Russell. When it comes to race day, of course, that's really going to be very significant. I think really good from Audi in the middle of the pack. I think from a team that's relatively new in lots of regards, I think they've done a solid job and running around without too much fuss, without too much hype around them, but doing a really, really solid job in the middle of the pack there. So I think that was really good. And I think we can safely say that with Oscar Piastri topping the timesheets, he's clearly favourite to become world champion at the end of this season.
Another bold prediction from Mark Priestley. Jenny Gow, I know you love a bold prediction.
I fear the prediction I'm about to make, because Lawrence Stroll, the owner of Aston Martin F1 team, has just walked into the hospitality unit didn't look exactly happy, and who can blame him? Lance Stroll only managing to get 13 laps. That's better than before, though. And Fernando Alonso, 17, just clicked through to 18 laps. And I don't know. What do you say for a team that should be somewhere near the top and is actually somewhere near the bottom? Glum faces, a lot of hard work's gone into this car. What's it paying? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty miserable day continued. All right, thank you, Jenny, for your hard work. Thank you, Andrew Benson, as well, and to Mark Priestley. We're going to be doing a podcast, actually, on the Checkered Flag feed, reflecting on the day's action and our first bit of track action. So just search Checkered Flag on BBC Sounds for that one, and make sure you're subscribed on the Checkered Flag feed on YouTube and on iPlayer as well for coverage throughout the season. FP3 will be here tomorrow on 5 Sports Extra, 1:30 in the morning, I think, for that one. So final bit of practice before we go. Qualifying at 5 o'clock in the morning on 5 Live on Saturday. So do make sure you join us for that one. In the meantime, we are going to be heading to Perth for day one of the test match between Australia and the India women, and joining our colleagues from ABC. Thanks for your company. We'll see you next time.